I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. I came from a close-knitted family, even though I came from a poor family. But they gave me education with the instruction that this is the tool that will help me to dig my way out of poverty and ignorance. I came without a dime in my pocket. All I had was big dreams, determination to succeed, and the resilience. So coming from another country gave me that insight to be able to understand and deal with people from different backgrounds.
I was walking into Kroger to pick up a prescription for my mom. Upon approaching the pharmacy, I slipped and fell in some liquid. I went to see my regular doctor, and that is when I knew that there was more going on from that fall. I then called Mr. Olawale, talked to him and let him know what was going on. I could just say that he's very professional and knowledgeable about what he does. He's very passionate about what he does, and he cares about his clients. I felt like I was a part of the Olawale family.
The goal is to make sure that our clients will leave feeling that someone gets them, knowing that someone was able to be the voice for them.
We needed an attorney because we needed somebody who understood the relationship between our case and the law. We had been through 4 different lawyers. We were very desperate. We knew from what we had heard that Emmanuel Olawale was the man, who could take us through that experience and see us through and give us the kind of outcome we were looking for. For him, your case is personal. He gave us hope. He gave us encouragement, and we knew that we had found the right man that would see us through.
Just know that when you're coming through the door, you're coming in through a place where you will be accepted and welcome as family, where you'll be seen as a person. At the Olawale Law Firm, we get you. We understand you. Trust us. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel the Law Olawale. My guest today is Beryl Piccolantonio. She is currently the Chief Ombudsman for the Ohio Workers' Compensation System, the Industrial Commission. She'll be talking to us today about what to expect from a workers' compensation claim. She has served in several roles under the Industrial Commission. So I'm not going to toot our horns because she has many horns. So I'm going to let her do that for herself. But thank you for coming on this show, Beryl.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So as you said, my name is Beryl Brown Piccolantonio. I currently serve as the ombudsman. You said it right the first time. I am the ombudsman of the workers' comp system. It's kind of a funny role in state government because the way that it was created is to make sure that the role that I have is as someone who is independent and neutral in the system, so that I and my staff can help people who are having difficulty navigate the system. So that is my name. That's what I do for a living right now. I'm also a mom. I have 3 sons. My husband and I have 3 sons. And I also, I guess in my free time, I serve as board president for the school board in Gahanna.
Thank you. What was it like growing up in Mayfield Heights, Ohio?
So I am not originally from Columbus. You're right. I was born and spent up until I was around 15 years old in a suburb of Cleveland called Mayfield Heights. It it was actually it was wonderful to grow up there. My dad graduated from Mayfield High School. He is the oldest of 5 boys. He grew up in a family. All of his brothers went to Mayfield City schools. My grandfather was a teacher in that school district. And when he stopped being a teacher, he served on that school board in Mayfield Heights. And then just a couple months after I was born, my dad ran and was elected to the school board in Mayfield Heights, where he served the entire time that I lived there. So it was wonderful to grow up there. I had a lot of family, being the oldest of 5 brothers, there were always a lot of uncles and grandparents and cousins around. My mom's family is also from that area. They are from, the rival school district, South Euclid Lyndhurst. My mom graduated from Brush High School. And she has a sister, and I had grandparents that all lived there too. So it was I feel very lucky. I had a childhood that was full of lots of good memories of family being around.
Wow, that's wonderful. You mentioned that your dad ran for school board while you were a kid. How did that affect you growing up around political campaigns and, door to door, things like that? How did that impact you?
Yeah, I think it actually has had a tremendous impact on my life. Like I said, the first time that he ran for school board, I was just a couple months old. So I don't remember a time before, like without campaigns, without um, public service as being part of my life. I wish I haven't been able to find the poster, but my parents tell me that his very first campaign poster was a photo. I mean, who doesn't love a smiling baby, right? So his very first campaign poster was a photo of me when I was just a couple months old. And I know that my parents both were people who were really dedicated to public service, to volunteering in the community. I grew up in a house where that was just the way of life, that we volunteered and served in our community in whatever way that we could. So he served on that school board for 15 years. And we were also just really active, helping out at school functions. But my parents were also very committed to social justice, to making our world a better place. My mom worked doing something that at the time it was called fair housing. So her job for a living was working to help integrate some of the segregated suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio. So I would say that all of that, and we volunteered on so many political campaigns growing up. I have joked before that former Lieutenant Governor Lee Fisher's pancake breakfast were like those were our regular, I don't know how, in my memory, it seems like they were much more often. I don't know how often they actually were, but we volunteered at campaign events. I have never actually watched a parade, but I think I've been in parades every single year for my entire life. And, I guess I would say the impact that it made is that I have just always known that it's really important to find the ways that I could be of service in my own community, to help make the community a better place.
Thank you. And you followed in your father's footsteps because right now you're the president of the Gahanna Jefferson Board of Education.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I had been a regular volunteer on campaigns my whole life. And when we moved to Franklin County, my dad ran and was elected to be a judge. He served as a judge on the Common Pleas Court and the Probate Court, and for a brief period of time, he had the honor of serving as Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. And then my mom was a Franklin County commissioner. So I was very intimately involved with their campaigns, helping to manage volunteers and all of that. And it never crossed my mind that I would be a person who would be a candidate herself. But we were having so just some interesting things going on in our school district. My kids were getting a little bit older, getting to be school age, and I was paying more attention to what was going on in my own school district. Um, in 20 let's see, it was in 2013 that I actually ran for the first time. We had a very divided school board, and there was a lot of controversy around a superintendent that we had. And I thought that some of the skills that I had from work, some of the negotiating, mediating skills that I thought could be helpful in kind of bringing the board together to focus on the things that we were supposed to focus on, which is kids. Um, and so I actually ran and lost that first time. And it also was an incredible learning experience. I kind of ran that campaign by myself. Local campaigns, they do not have the resources that my parents' countywide and statewide campaigns had. So I pretty much ran that campaign by myself, worked really hard, learned a lot, and it was crushing actually to lose, but it was a good experience for me, and it only made that desire to want to serve even stronger. So I picked myself up and I looked for some help the next time, some friends who could help, so that even if I was showing people how I needed help, at least I wasn't doing it by myself. And in 2015, I was successfully elected to serve on the school board. I ran for reelection and was reelected in 2019. And so I am in I think my 7th year of serving on that board.
That's awesome. When did you realize you wanted to become a lawyer?
Well, like a lot of little kids, I think, I used to look at my dad and just kind of be in awe of the work that he did. I very distinctly remember, I think I was in 3rd grade. My dad had a jury trial, and he worked out an arrangement where I was allowed to miss school to come and watch the jury trial. The case involved a woman who was a school teacher, who had been accused she was charged with, I think it was vehicular manslaughter. She was dropping her daughter or picking her daughter up maybe from dance practice, it was a busy area on a main street. And I think she was picking her daughter up and she was pulling out onto this very busy main road. She was kind of inching out into the skirt of the word skirt I remember so distinctly because it was part of the diagram. She was inching out into the apron of the skirt of the driveway, and looking at the cars, and she didn't see that there was a pedestrian, and she hit and killed a woman who was crossing the street. The woman happened to be an older woman who was a nun, and the case got a lot of attention just because of, I think, the dynamics. It was a teacher, her daughter was in the car, and it was a nun who was hit and killed. And my dad let me come and watch that entire jury trial. He was representing the teacher. It made such an impression on me, not because of the outcome, not because of the decision that was made, but just to be able to observe that process and to see a jury really have to work through a decision that impacted so many people's lives. The nun, the teacher, the daughter, all of their family members. And so it has been something that has been inside of me, I think, ever since. I went to college still thinking that I was going to go to law school. There was a short period of time when I don't know, I told myself like, are you really sure that you really want to do this, or are you just, you look up to your parents, I think sometimes. And I was very interested in, my major was psychology. My dad actually told me, don't be a pre-law major, major in whatever it is that is interesting to you, whatever you're passionate about. So I was a psychology major. I loved my psychology classes. And I actually went to graduate school for psychology because I thought, well, let me try and do this thing that I love, and maybe this childhood thought that I want to be like my dad, like maybe that's just a childhood thought. So I went to graduate school for psychology, but it pulled me right back in, and I was 2 years into my program when I realized, yes, I love psychology, and it was a wonderful program. I learned a lot about child development and how the brain works, and I still wanted to be a lawyer. So I came back to Columbus and was able to. I actually worked for a year at a law firm, doing something totally different, and then went to law school.
That was awesome. And you went to the Ohio State University College of Law.
I did,
And
yeah.
while you were in law school, you got pregnant twice.
I did. I would not advise that. As I kind of just described, I was a little bit older than some of my peers when I started law school. At least I felt like I was. Ohio State is a traditional day law school program. So there were a lot of students who were coming right out of undergrad, where I was, I guess, 3 years removed from law school. And for whatever reason at the time, that felt like a lot. My husband and I got married during the fall break of my first year of law school, and I got pregnant and had my first son, our oldest son. It would have been in between my second and third year of law school. I ended up starting work full time too. And so I added an extra year and did 4 years instead of 3 of law school. But yes, and then I had our middle son, my second, was born right at the end of my last year of law school.
How did you juggle all those responsibilities? 2 pregnancies, 2 kids, full-time job, a husband, and law school. Come on.
Honestly, I don't know. Like I said, at the time, it all made sense to me. I also knew that my parents had me during my dad's first year of law school. It didn't really process in my mind that it's a little bit different when you're the one having the kids. And it was a little bit different. And I also, like I said, I started working full time when our oldest son was 1. And then the first time that my dad ran for common pleas court in Franklin County was in 2004. So that was just a couple months after my first son was born. I agreed to be his treasurer, not realizing what a time commitment that was as well. I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of like very blurry memory of that entire time period. I was exhausted. I was emotionally, I think the impact of having kids hit me a lot different than I was expecting. I had such a hard time putting our oldest son into daycare. I was really lucky because Ohio State has their own daycare program, and we were able to get him in there. There were amazing teachers that I'm still friends with to this day who they didn't bat an eye when I would run over there in between class just because I needed to see our son. But how did I do it? I don't know. The same way that all of us do the hard things. There wasn't really a different option. But it was a very busy block of time, that's for sure.
I can only imagine. And how did you end up with the Industrial Commission?
It was actually kind of a fluke. I hate to say, I mean, maybe that's how the things in life, the best things in life are. But after my first year of law school, the way that Ohio State operates, you're not allowed to work at all in that first year. So in the summer, they really encourage students to work, and it's very competitive. Um, it was overwhelming to me. I felt like I had just gotten married. I wasn't pregnant yet, but I still kind of felt like I was at this different place than a lot of the other students who I was competing for these jobs with. I was intimidated to apply for a job with a law firm. That's where a lot of my peers and friends were applying. It felt really intimidating to me. And so I applied for what I thought were, I guess, a little bit more non-traditional summer jobs for law students. And one of those jobs was a job as a legal intern for the Industrial Commission. I didn't really even know, to be honest, what exactly the Industrial Commission was. It's kind of a funny word, I think, especially when you think about what they actually do. But I had a really wonderful interview with a woman. Her name is Mary Stevenson. She doesn't work there anymore, but she was just an incredible person who was very kind. And she offered me a job and I took it, and I had a great experience. She made sure that as an intern that I got to go to the courthouse every week. I got to meet the commissioners at the Industrial Commission. I was given the chance to sit in on hearings and observe those hearings. I got to meet a lot of people at the agency. And I worked there as an intern. I think it was right around the time that I think it was right after I had my oldest son that I made a decision. It was at that point I had to decide, either I'm going to stop working and focus on school and really do this in 3 years, or I'm going to keep working and it's going to take longer. So I actually quit. I quit the internship. I made a decision. I'm going to get back on track with school. I'm going to make up. I had lightened my course load after I had my first son because I did have such a hard time leaving him. But I decided I'm going to get back on track and finish in 3 years with my class. So I quit. A couple months later, I received a phone call from the administrative assistant of one of the commissioners, who was, I don't know. I mean, we had some conversation in the time that I worked there, and he was looking for a full-time legal assistant and wondered if I would be interested. It was a shock to me. It was because this was like a regular full-time job that they were wanting to know if I would interview for. And my husband and I had to really have a hard conversation about, what do I want to do here? This is an amazing opportunity that is being presented to me to interview for. Do I want to interview and see how it goes, or do I want to really do what I intended to do and finish law school in 3 years? We made the decision that I would interview and see how it went. And I had a wonderful interview, I guess. Actually, I think the commissioner had me go through several rounds of interviews. And then I was offered the job. And again, I had just had a really hard decision to make, but it was an opportunity that I could not pass up. It was a full-time job as the legal assistant to the labor member of the Industrial Commission. It did mean readjusting my schedule. It did mean adding an extra year of school and figuring out how I was going to time and finish law school full time. But it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up.
Now, and here you are. Can you tell us what does workers' compensation mean?
Sure. So workers' compensation is the system that we put in place to address a situation when somebody is injured at work. And rather than having that scenario get worked out privately or worked out through the court system, in Ohio, we have set up a system through the state of Ohio that addresses that injury, and I guess on the employer side addresses basically an insurance plan for those kinds of injuries.
Yeah. How, if let's say an employee gets injured on the job, do they have the option of using their health insurance instead of filing a workers' compensation claim?
They don't have that option. They are required to report, or the employer is required to report. I mean, the burden is actually on the employer to report the injury. And I don't know if anyone who's watching has ever been injured at work, and sometimes it does go through the health insurance system first, or sometimes you have an injury that isn't a work related injury, and you get a questionnaire or a phone call from your health insurance company wanting to verify that it is not a work related injury. Because if it is a work related injury, it does have to go through the workers' comp system rather than through private health insurance.
Thank you. What happens in a situation where the employer doesn't have the workers' compensation insurance coverage and then an employee gets injured?
So the injury is still processed through the workers' compensation system. It is an obligation for employers in the state of Ohio to have workers' compensation, and if they don't, then it is billed to them on a dollar for dollar basis, and they are still required to get workers' compensation coverage. So the
No,
state pays the upfront cost so that the person who's injured can get the treatment that they need to get, but then they deal with the employer on the back end of it.
does the insurance coverage cover independent contractors?
So that I know that sounds like a not complicated question, but it has turned into a complicated legal question. The answer is no. It is not. There's not coverage for an independent contractor. The thing that's complicated, though, is figuring out whether or not somebody is an independent contractor or whether they are an employee. And I worked as a hearing officer for about 3.5 years, and some of the most complicated cases that I heard were situations where the employer believed that the injured person was an independent contractor, but in fact, based on a legal analysis, they actually were an employee. And so those are really difficult situations because if the employer doesn't believe that they're an employee, then they probably aren't set up in a way that they can fiscally absorb the cost of an injury like that. But it is a legal determination that examines a set of factors to decide if they are, in fact, an independent contractor or an employee.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask you about your role as a hearing officer. For those who are watching or listening to the show, can you tell us what the role of a hearing officer within the system?
Sure. So in the state of Ohio, like I said, the workers' compensation system is something that is run by the state of Ohio. And it is an agency called the Bureau of Workers' Compensation that administers the workers' compensation system. Or there are some employers that are self-insuring employers, and if they are self-insuring, then they manage and administer the system themselves. However, you always, because workers' compensation is not something that is handled primarily or first through the court system, there's also kind of a quasi-judicial agency. That's what the Industrial Commission is. So the Industrial Commission is the quasi-court system, the administrative court system for the workers' compensation system. And any dispute, whether it is with a state-funded employer or with a self-insuring employer, anytime that there is a dispute, those disputes are heard by a hearing officer at the Industrial Commission. And I don't know if you want me to go into the detail or not, but there are 3 levels of hearings at the Industrial Commission. So at the very first level, when you have a dispute, the hearing is set in front of a district hearing officer. And that's any dispute that comes to the Industrial Commission. There are there's a couple disputes that go straight to the second level, but most disputes start out with a district hearing officer. And then if any party does not agree with the decision of the district hearing officer, they can file an appeal, and they have an automatic right to have that hearing or have that dispute be heard at a second level. That's the staff hearing officer level. And then again, if any party disagrees, they can file an appeal to the second level decision. And that's when it is discretionary at the third level. So the Industrial Commission commissioners are at that third level. And most things that they hear are discretionary. Usually they grant appeals if it is, I don't know, sometimes an issue that comes up repeatedly that is decided differently by hearing officers, or sometimes it's a unique issue that they think should get a third level hearing, but that is not a guaranteed right to that third level.
Thank you. And when does an employee, when do they have the right to file a case to the common pleas court? Is it after the second or the third level?
So if they have had their appeal at the third level, if the appeal has not been granted, they have some additional choices. They can file a request that the commissioners exercise continuing jurisdiction. So there's like another, if they believe that there was a mistake of law or there's a list of reasons that they can specify. They may want to ask the commissioners to hear it, even if the appeal was denied. Most of the time, though, that's when they file and go out into court, into common pleas court. And some issues can go into common pleas court, and then there are other kinds of issues that can only go to the Court of Appeals.
Okay. And is it only the employee that has the right to file an appeal, or does the employer also have the same right?
The employer has the same right. And actually, the Bureau of Workers' Compensation is also, or in a state-funded claim, the Bureau of Workers' Compensation is also a party to the claim.
Okay. And how does that work when it comes to the employee? How do employees take it when it seems like the Bureau is against them?
Yeah, I think that workers' compensation claims can be very, very hard on everybody who's involved in the claim. Whether you've been working for an employer for a short period of time or a long period of time, I think it can feel very adversarial very quickly to go through a workers' compensation claim. It's interesting because, if you think about it, I think some employers particularly think about it almost like they think about their health insurance. And so if you think about it from an insurance standpoint, yes, there are times with health insurance when treatment may get disputed, or I don't know, a medication. They might try to encourage you or tell you that you have to try a different medication. But with workers' compensation, um, I don't know the explanation. I mean, I have some ideas about why, but I don't exactly know why it has become such a legal and such an adversarial system. But with workers' compensation, different from health insurance, you do have situations where not only is the insurance company disputing the kind of treatment or the medication, but also you have lots of instances where the employer or the bureau is really disputing the entire claim and whether or not it should be allowed, or what conditions were actually part of the injury. And so it I think it very quickly can, like I said, feel very adversarial, and it can get pretty emotional. From the injured person, absolutely, and also surprisingly from the employer. The role that I have in the system as the ombudsman, is that I have a staff of 7 people who are the ones who spend most of the time talking with people who contact our office, but anybody can contact our office. So a lot of times they're working with injured people, but then also they work with employers, and they work with attorneys, and they work with medical providers. And so yes, absolutely, it can feel that way for an injured person, and also it can feel that way for all of those other players, I guess, in the system. Um, but a workers' compensation injury, that can change a person's life forever. Um,
Yes, it can. And in a situation where, let's say, the employer was grossly negligent or reckless and an employee gets severely injured, do
mhm.
they have the right to file a direct case with the courts, or they still have to go through the Industrial Commission and Workers' Compensation system?
So workers' compensation is considered to be a no-fault system. So that's one of the reasons that we have this system in place, is that injured workers don't have to prove that the employer was reckless or negligent. There is supposed to be coverage regardless of the intent of the employer. Um, if there is recklessness or negligence, then I mean, yes, in some scenarios, you can also go out into court. Yes. But you do have to go through the workers' compensation system too.
So, can we safely assume that the inverse is also true in a situation where the employee's negligence caused their own injury? They will still be eligible to file a workers' compensation claim.
Yes, that is how it is supposed to work, is that it is supposed to be a no-fault system. So even if, um, that my mind, probably a lot of people who practice workers' comp, their mind always goes to this. There's a case where I don't remember how old the individual was. I feel like they were a minor, but I could be wrong. But it was somebody who worked at a restaurant where there was a fryer, and I think there was water and hot oil involved, which is never a good combination, right? And it was argued that, that it was, I don't remember if it was reckless or negligent, but it was argued that there was fault on the part of the employee. And it was reiterated in that court decision that workers' compensation is a no fault system. And even when there's an error on the part of the employee, as long as it's not a substance related error, the coverage is still there.
And is there a statute of limitation on when to file a workers' compensation claim?
Yes, and that statute of limitations has shortened over the years, so it's 1 year now.
Okay, so that 1 year, is that the responsibility of the employer or the employee?
Yeah, so the responsibility for reporting is actually on the employer. They are required to keep a record and report all work-related injuries. But if it doesn't get reported and it's the employee who is, past the statute of limitations, that responsibility does then fall on them, and they would not be able to pursue the claim. So even though it is the obligation of the employer, if you are an employee who is injured, you want to report the injury as quickly as possible.
Okay. What happened in a situation where an employee files a report, the employer didn't like it, and they decide to retaliate and terminate the employee's
So
employment?
there is protection in the law that it is illegal for an employer to fire an employee because they filed a workers' compensation claim. I say it like it's simple. And in the law, the way it's written is simple, but there are all kinds of scenarios that are just much more complicated than that, both ways. So, for example, maybe somebody gets injured who was an employee who was already an employee who had been documented to have performance issues. And maybe that employer was already planning to terminate that employment. And maybe the injury was related to, I don't know, another incident where the employee, or maybe the employee got injured and then wasn't, didn't have documentation to support being off of work, was a habitual no call, no show kind of employee. It had already been documented, and then it happened again after the injury. Well, then the question is, was the employer terminating them because this no call, no show, this absenteeism issue happened again, or was it because they filed the workers' compensation claim? And like I said, sometimes situations, it can be really difficult to know because a workers' compensation claim can get pretty burdensome and expensive for an employer. So sometimes it is difficult to know what the intent was of all of the parties when those terminations happen.
Can a self-employed employer file workers' compensation claim against themselves?
So even a self-employed employer is required to have workers' compensation coverage. So yes, those are tricky, but yes.
Are employees entitled to pain and suffering under the workers' compensation system?
So it's not called pain and suffering, but there is an award of compensation. It's called a permanent partial award. And it is supposed to compensate for the loss, whatever that. So there's different kinds of compensation that people are eligible for when they get injured. One is called temporary total disability compensation. That is supposed to compensate at a reduced percentage, I might add, for the time that you missed from work. If your injury caused you to be hurt in a way that you can't do your job, you can get that kind of compensation. Permanent partial compensation is thought to compensate you kind of for, like, I don't know, it's not pain and suffering, but it's comparable to pain and suffering.
And what is the third
So
compensation they can get?
the other kinds of compensation, there's something called working wage loss. So sometimes somebody gets injured and eventually they are able to come back to work, but it's into a job that is not anywhere near what they were earning before. So there's working wage loss and there's non-working wage loss, and that's supposed to help make up for some of that difference in wages. There's also permanent total disability compensation. That's a kind of compensation that somebody may be entitled to if they are permanently unable to work because of their workplace injury. And then there's also something that is called it's a VSSR. It's a violation of a specific safety regulation. I think I feel like I'm missing a word there, but that is a kind of compensation that um, those are rare to get. But when there's you talked about negligence or recklessness on the part of the employer, that's kind of what that is there for. So if there's some safety regulation or something that the employer didn't follow, there may be an award that an injured worker is entitled to through that.
Thank you. And how long can a claim stay open?
It can stay open indefinitely as long as there is active medical treatment that is happening. So those permanent total disability claims, those are claims that they're not going to ever end unless there's a settlement of the claim. That individual is permanently disabled. They may be seeking medical treatment for the rest of their lives related to that claim. So as long as there's active medical treatment that's happening, the claim doesn't close.
Thank you. You mentioned that there could be settlement in the case. What does that mean? Does that mean that the employer can decide to settle the case for a lump sum?
Yes, and I'm not going to go too much into detail because there's a lot of different scenarios. But if it's a claim that is a state-funded claim where the Bureau is involved, that settlement process has to involve the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. Some of the other complicating factors have to do with things like, Medicare set-asides. But yes, the short answer to your question is yes, there can be a settlement of a claim. It could be a settlement just related to treatment. It could be a settlement of the whole claim. But yes, a claim can close that way if there's an agreement reached on a lump sum payment.
Thank you. Can a claim survive the length of employment?
Yes, a claim can survive the length of employment. And that's when sometimes some of those other kinds of compensation come into play. The Bureau of Workers' Compensation also has vocational rehabilitation, which is a program that is designed to help an injured worker find a new job if that employment ends, or if the employment ends, for a variety of reasons, but maybe one of those reasons is that the injured worker would never be able or couldn't do that job anymore. So yes, a claim can definitely survive the length of employment.
Yeah. And your journey with the Ohio Industrial Commission has been, well, let me say outstanding. You started off as an intern, you were an hearing officer, you're currently the chief ombudsman, and you've played all this role. Right now in your current position, what are those things that you believe you've been able to accomplish as the chief ombudsman?
Yeah, so when I remember very clearly when I was a hearing officer, there were a lot of times that I would hear a case and I would just, I would sit there after the hearing and think, oh my gosh, there are all these things that came up that weren't issues in front of me. A claim, like we just talked about, it can get very complicated and can be very lengthy. And the thing when you have a hearing is that it's only that one issue that is in front of the hearing officer. So I often referred both injured workers and employers to the ombuds office to resolve all those other kinds of things that came up in front of me that I was not permitted to talk with them about even. So when I came into the ombuds office as the chief ombudsman in 2013, it was at an interesting time. The office had been really shrunk in size, number of staff, and some of there had been some questions about some of the things that had gone on with the prior person who served in the role of chief ombudsman. So I had this amazing opportunity to come in to to put a structure in place for the office, to decide what kind of staff did that office need. I was able to hire and train myself the staff who I have working for me. They are amazing people with incredibly caring hearts. They are wonderful listeners. They very much care about helping every single person that comes to them. Um, I was I just feel so lucky that I had the opportunity to hire, to train, to put the system in place. I got to build a system where we track and I guess the statistics of the kinds of issues that are coming to us. I was able to build all of that, and sometimes, I think it's such a well-oiled machine. I don't always feel like they need me, which is, I mean, I guess that's a good thing, right? That's what you want, is that they are such wonderful people. They work so hard to help people. So I am really proud of the work that they do every day. I am proud of the annual reports that I produce every year. We've been able to standardize a lot of the reporting so that when somebody's looking from report to report, they can really see what has changed, what hasn't changed in the workers' comp system. There's a lot that I'm proud of.
Thank you. When you feel as a leader that they don't need you, it means that you've done a great job to train and hire good people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you're currently the president of the Gahanna Jefferson School Board. Can you tell us a little bit more about your role in that, as the president?
Sure. So serving on school board is an incredible honor. I serve with 4 other colleagues. The 5 of us are responsible for hiring and evaluating the superintendent and the treasurer, and we are responsible for setting policy for the district. Most people who serve on school boards also have full-time jobs. The people who serve on the school boards are not the day-to-day people in the school district. But we're the ones who, like I said, we set the overall policy that the day-to-day employees operate within. It's been a wild ride, I think, when I came onto the board. I think I kind of described I was coming onto a divided board right away. It was asked of me if I would be willing to serve as president because of those mediation skills that I had. We kind of thought it would help bring everybody together and focus on the things that were most important, the thing we should be focusing on, which is kids. That I feel like it was kind of a trial by fire that first year. I jumped into the role as board president. We hired a new superintendent. We hired a new treasurer. In the time that I've been on the board, I have served as board president the whole time. We just got through a hiring process for hiring another superintendent. Pretty typical time frame for a superintendent to serve. So I'm now like on the second wave of that. But in the time that I've served on the board, we have done the work that we needed to do to look at all of our facilities. We have passed 2 incredibly impactful levies related to our buildings, and we are working through our master facility plan. We are at the tail end of it, I guess, or the middle of the tail end of it. We have added on to, we've built a new elementary school. We've added on to 2 elementary buildings. We've added on to 3 middle schools, and we are building a brand new high school. We also have hired a new treasurer. We have gone through all of our policies, I think multiple times at this point. And And then we had the most unusual and indescribable experience of going through a global pandemic. Um, and there, I think that would take a whole other show to talk about. Um, but I have learned a lot. It has been an amazing, incredible experience to serve on the board. And I just feel lucky every day.
You're also currently serving as a member of the Eastland Fairfield Board of Education. Where do you get your energy from?
I um I don't know. I mean, I like I said, I feel like I feel lucky every day. Honestly, I wake up every day and I just feel lucky. I've got a wonderful family. I am so lucky to have these 3 boys who are happy and healthy boys. I have just this burning drive inside of me, and I'm sure it's been there because of what I observed with my own family, that I want to make sure that I spend every free minute that I have making sure that every single one of us has the opportunity that is guaranteed by our Constitution to succeed, to prosper, and to have access to what we call the American dream.
Thank you. And you're juggling all these important roles. What is it like for Andy, your husband, for Vincent, Max, and Alex, and the dog?
And the dog, we have Ginger too. I have one other female in my house.
How are they handling it?
I think you'd have to ask them. I mean, sometimes it's hard. I'm going to be really honest, especially in the pandemic. Like I said, that's a whole other show. That was really hard on all of us for so many reasons. But my parents modeled a very egalitarian marriage relationship. And that's what I have too. There's no responsibilities in our household that are mine or his. All of the responsibilities are both of ours. And it's not without luck. Like I said, we are incredibly lucky to have good health. I know, I mean, I have a younger sister who does not, and I know that is luck. So I truly do wake up grateful and thankful every day.
Yeah, yes, we should all be grateful because you never know.
You never know.
It's not a given.
Yep.
No, thank you so much for coming on Legal Angle and for the past 45 to almost an hour. You've been educating us about workers' compensation. And I'm sure the people watching or listening to this appreciate it. What does it mean to you to come on this show to educate the public?
I am thankful to you. I am always looking for ways to let the public know about the Ombuds office. I actually think it's one of those amazing resources that is out there that not everybody knows about. So I am really grateful to be able to come on the show. And even if it's just one person who hears about the Ombuds office that never knew it existed before, that's a wonderful thing.
Thank you. I appreciate your time because I know you are very busy, but you took the time to come to talk to us. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. And thank you so much for doing the show. I think it's a wonderful resource for the community.
Thank you. And for those of you watching or listening to us, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you. We appreciate your time. And until next time, stay safe and stay blessed. Bye for now.